Magic makers. Today is a topic that so many of you can identify with. And, this guest struck a chord with me because, she said that life is extremely overwhelming for people from time to time. And maybe for you, you always feel like your stress button is always on like red alert. And I love her approach. She has 3 R's that are really going to help you really kind of put a box on this so we can start to figure out how do we get out of this stress box. And so I want to introduce you to my guest today, Domineice Clifton. And I know that what she's going to share today is going to like really just give you some mind nuggets that are just going to probably blow your mind. All right. Denise, welcome to the show. Domineice, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim, for having me. I am thrilled to be here and to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. And, I always like to ask people because I know I came to this work because of my life and I know how crazy my past life was. So how did you come to this work? Did you have like the same kind of like backstory where like your life was like, OMG, and you're like, I need to do something about it?
So the short answer is yes. We typically teach what we need, and that was the case for me. I always tell people that I never saw myself being in the wellness space. My background is in fundraising, grant writing, and event planning, and so that's where I spent a lot of time in my career. And 3.5 years ago at this point, I had a newborn baby and a 3-year-old. COVID had just hit. I was really stressed out. I had walked away from my job for an extended maternity leave, and then COVID hit. And so it was a very long maternity leave.
Yeah. Surprise.
Wonderful timing. I had my daughter in September of 2019. And so just to put a little bit of a time frame on that. But even before that moment of like being at a really low point, not really having a plan and being sure what I was going to do, my husband and I were having some hard times financially. So I was stressed in that moment, but I had lived my life being really stressed and always worrying about things because that's what I learned from my mother. Right. And so anytime anything didn't go the way that I thought it needed to go, I would be in a habitual state of stress. And I was overweight for most of my life from 8 years old up until a couple of years ago. And so I literally wore that stress in my body. And once I started focusing on myself, which looked like really nurturing and nourishing my mind, body, and spirit every day, the weight started to fall off easier and much easier than like all the other times in the past where I had just, focused on crash diets and nutrition. Right. And I had an aha moment of, I had always focused on just the physical. And it was really when I focused on, nourishing all the parts of myself and healing, which was a huge part of that for me. When I focused on letting go of things that I was holding on to energetically, physically, the weight came off and stayed off. And so I just felt really passionate about sharing that with other people. I became a nutrition and wellness coach, and I did that for several years, working with busy women, busy moms. And I saw this pattern in the women that I was working with where they would always be really stressed out, really overwhelmed. This was, again, at the height of COVID. These were busy career women who had lives and they were wives and mothers. And there was this pattern of like super stressed out. And so for me, it was, how can I support my clients better? And like, how do I teach them how to manage their stress better? Because we can't focus on weight loss or a meal plan if the house is literally on fire right now. Exactly. And in that work of understanding how to support my clients, the more research that I did on stress, the more that I realized it was like a rabbit hole of, it was, a light bulb went off of, oh my God, so many of the things that we're seeing, whether it's dis-ease, illness, being overweight, violence in our communities, there's unaddressed stress and trauma at the root of all of those things. So it was a combination of me working to heal myself and then also wanting to share what I had learned from supporting my clients with the world, which got me to where I am today.
Good. I like that because there's a couple of things that you said. You learned that when things weren't going your way, you stressed about them.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope people listening right here, Magic Makers, I hope some of you are like, oh, girl, because it is. As soon as like, and it could be the simplest things, say the light didn't turn green when you wanted it because you were late for work. And then all of a sudden this like it means you make this meaning about why you didn't make that green light. And we can just kind of spiral from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're talking about, which was most of my life, was a habitual stress response. I had learned again from my mother that when something happens that is out of my control, this is what I do. Like, this is how I respond. And it wasn't healthy ways to deal with things. And so if it was a bill that I couldn't pay or the light being, not the color that I wanted, or something happening at work, all I knew to do was stress. I didn't know to breathe. I
Yeah.
didn't know to focus on my body. I didn't know to pause. I didn't know any of those things. So all I knew was stress and worry and trying to control situations and hanging on so tightly and trying to manipulate things. Like that is how I lived most of my life.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are living that way where it's so automatic that we don't even
Mm.
realize that there's another way to do things and that we
Yes.
can control. What I love is that I study the Kabbalah, and what they teach is that you can't control anything. You can only control yourself. All the crazy things are going to happen. The kids are going to be crazy. The partner's going to be crazy. Life is going to be crazy. You can't control any of that. Although sometimes we try to, right?
Oh
Especially
God, yeah.
as women. But you can control yourself. You can control how you respond to things. And that little bit of a mind shift for me has been such a game changer in how I approach life. Not to say that I don't have moments. Don't get me wrong. I
Oh
have a
God,
3
yeah.
and a 6-year-old, so I have my moment. But when I think about, okay, she's having a meltdown, I can't control her. I can stop right now and breathe for a few minutes and like get myself together so that I can show up from a more empowered place and like calm my body down so that I can show up from a place that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's funny because, it is something that we've learned that, many of the magic makers listen here, we're control freaks, right? We're type A plus plus.
Oh, yeah.
And in our mind, like life has to go in this particular sequence.
Yeah.
And all it takes is one little thing that like pushes our sequence out of sequence.
Yeah.
We're like, what the hell? And you just start to like spiral from there.
Yes.
And so what you said is like, you know what? Life's gonna life. Like no, and I always tell people the quietest life ever got was during COVID. Like we are never, hopefully, never gonna go back to that spot where for what 4 months we were just like told like stay your ass home. And even then we found something to stress about.
Yeah. Honestly, that was such a gift for me. COVID changed my entire life. So again, around that time, I was on maternity leave. I have many past lives. I feel like a cat who has done all the things. So I walked away from my job, and in the midst of walking away and becoming a nutrition and wellness coach, there was a point where I had started a natural hair salon with a friend, which was horrible timing because then COVID happened and everything shut down. So we literally had this natural hair salon that was less than 6 months old that we had to shut down. And I was stressed. Again, I worry about the money. I had taken on most of the financial risk for that. So there was a lot on me. So being at this really low point, I was like, you know what? I know nothing else to do because all of this is out of my control right now. I know nothing else to do but to be still, to go inward. And going that journey within was the first time in a long time, I would say, or really forever, that I had done that. But those moments, those months changed my life. I was meditating one day and I got this message just as clear as day from my intuition, this download that said, focus on your mind, your body, and your spirit every day for 90 days. And I did that. And it was so hard for me because I had never been consistent with anything before. And so the idea of doing this thing every day with a newborn and a young child and trying to figure out life, it was like, what? It was really hard for me in the beginning. But when I tell you that 90 days changed my life, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you now had it not been for me doing that. Because physically, I maybe lost like 15 pounds. But at the end of that 90 days, there was something that had been awakened within me because I sat with myself. I was still for 3 months straight. I was healing. I was, going within. And a lot of us are afraid to do that. But when you do that work, like that's where all the answers are.
Oh God, yeah. And you're absolutely right. Because if I said to you, everyone wants to lose weight, right? All of your clients are like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they all want to lose weight. And if you said, girlfriend, I want you for, let's just say 15 minutes, 15 minutes a day for the next, let's just cut it in half, next 30 days.
Yeah.
15 minutes a day. I don't care what time of day it is. Just sit. They would look at you like you're asking them to climb Kilimanjaro in clear heels and a bikini.
Yeah.
And, and so many people, you see this trend all over social media. Can we skip to the good part? And like that muck, that mess. And if you think back those 90 days, probably it wasn't until probably day 80 that you're like, I think there's something here. But for 79 days, you're like, damn it. And your mind just was like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we listening to that? I don't know where it came from, but I'm listening. And you probably wanted to pull your butt out of that chair multiple times, but you're like, let's see.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would like squeeze in time when my daughter was napping. You know, I would find time to squeeze in time for myself. And again, what was the difference? What was the game changer for me was, Kim, I was overweight from 8 years old up until about 32. I would lose the weight, I would gain the weight. I would lose the weight, I would gain the weight. And it was this vicious, really frustrating cycle of, why can't I keep the weight off? Like, what is it? What's wrong with me? Right? Like, why can I not figure this out? And I remember telling myself around the time that I was at that low point, if I can figure this out, I can do anything, because I had spent over 25 years struggling with food and it was winning. And what was the difference for me was that I had tried the lemonade diet and the celery diet and the eating, a salad with, I tried everything. What was different for me was this time I said, I'm going to allow my body to release. Like, I'm going to let go of all the things that I'm holding on to, all of it. And that's what the last couple of years have been for me. Releasing, which is the first R that you mentioned, is I'm going to let go of all the things that I'm holding internally that are manifesting externally. Like, I'm holding that, that baggage on my body. So what I always tell people, although I'm not in the weight loss space anymore, if you can relate to any part of my story and you've had a hard time with maintaining weight or losing the weight and maintaining the weight, it's not a magic diet pill or nutrition plan that's going to change you. It's you sitting with yourself and figuring out, what are the emotions behind the emotional eating? Like, what is it that's making me resort to this behavior? And when you get to the root of it, because there's always a root of it, the weight loss is a byproduct of you doing the healing work.
Yeah. And and it's funny because I have a good friend, and for years, just like you, she's like, you insert diet, she tried it. And then, we worked together for a while, but like, she just couldn't like click in, just with the basics. And then, fast forward, she just posted on Facebook, just like you, she's like, oh my God, I just can't believe it. Like, I just lost all this weight because I let go. Right. I just I finally, let go of, maybe because, we've been programmed, like, a weight loss has to look a certain way, you have to lose a certain amount of weight, and then I have to struggle or whatever. And she's just like, Kim, like, I think back to some of the messages you would say to me, and I just wasn't ready to hear it. And I think from people listening here, they're just like, how do you get to this place? And, and I'm sure, some of the tools you talk about, it's just like, you have to just be, one, have the courage, and two, be curious. Like, what would happen if I did it this way? You know?
Yep. Surrendering is such a big piece of that, because it didn't I will say that during that time, I did make changes to my diet. I won't say that it was just, I meditated and the weight fell off. I cut sugar. I cut a lot of processed foods. Like, I literally went through my pantry at the start of COVID and threw all the gunk out. Like, I got rid of it all. My husband was like, what is happening? I had the trash can in the kitchen with the newborn strapped to my body, climbing up on the stepper to get rid of all the things. So I did that. I was aware and conscious of what I was eating and making mindful food choices. But I was only able to stick with that because I was meditating and because I was moving my body and because I was allowing my body to release. So I feel like for me, putting all of those things together, my body was like, finally, like, now you get it. Like, now you get why we've been here. Because I, again, from 8 years old, had been holding on to so much. And so it's like surrendering and releasing is the first part of the process.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Cause it's like, you want to surrender, but then I feel that people get like squirrely, the technical talk, squirrely. And it's just like, you want to run back to what like you run back to like, well, I know that if I cut these out, and then you can only cut it out until you can't cut it out anymore. And then all of a sudden, even if you've cleaned out your cupboards, you're still thinking about whatever the food is that you're thinking about. And you haven't really addressed all the mind, all the noise that is like telling you all the crazy stories.
Yeah. It's deep work. Honestly,
It
I have
is.
done so much of studying the body, studying the mind and neuroscience, even understanding the way that the mind functions. So a lot of times we don't realize that we're governed by our subconscious mind. So again, going
Yeah.
back to those habitual stress responses, if subconsciously you say, when I get stressed, I eat, and that's the subconscious belief or pattern that you hold.
Right.
Consciously, right? You can be thinking, I'm going to do XYZ. I'm going to go to the
Right.
gym. I'm going to, work out, whatever it looks like for you. I'm going to do all of these things. You have that plan consciously, and you get frustrated because you're trying to figure out, you feel defeated because you're like, am trying to exert all the willpower and this is not working. What you
Right.
don't realize is that the subconscious gorilla is driving the bus, right? So you got to get
Yeah.
the conscious and the subconscious on the same page. Otherwise, what we experience is cognitive dissonance. When you're thinking one thing with that 5% conscious control that you have, and then subconsciously your mind is like, no, this is the pattern that I'm used to. And so I'm going to continue doing this thing. So again, it's so much more than just a nutrition plan or a diet. It is mind, body,
Yeah.
and spirit, because you got to get all of those parts on board together for lasting change to occur.
Yeah. And as you said that, I don't, as health and fitness professionals, I think it's so challenging to get across the mind piece,
Mm-hmm.
because that just seems so woo.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems so like I'm sitting on my cushion with a ruby in my head and, waiting for things to happen. Where
Yeah.
I know many of the women you work with and women I work with, they're like, Kim, I
Oh,
I
yeah.
I need
Give
to
me the meal
do.
plan.
Right. I need to do. It's like go to the gym for 4 hours,
Yeah.
in it, on it,
Mm-hmm.
got it. Only eat kiwis, on it. And it's like, if you're just like, sit for 5 minutes, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yep.
not on it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And I know for me, like I am a go giver. I talk fast. I just go, go, go. And that was for like me changing my patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Girl, that was like trying to have a tractor trailer make a U-turn. It was really
Yeah.
hard because
Mm-hmm.
it's what I knew.
Yeah. But that's the
And
work.
yeah, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like after 15 plus years doing the same shit and
Not getting anywhere. Mm-hmm.
right, getting this close and then thinking it's doubling down, thinking
Yeah.
it's less food, more exercise, more something other than changing what the hell I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. You're just like, I'm just going to do an experiment.
Yeah. One thing that I learned in my, again, studying the mind was there's this guy, John Assaraf. I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
are familiar, but he talks a lot about the brain and how we change the mind. I remember listening to a YouTube video and he talked about we all have an internal thermometer. And just like the thermometer in our house, you set it at 70. If it gets too cold, if it gets too hot, the air conditioning will kick on to bring you back up to 70 because that's what you've set it at and that's what it's used to. The
Right.
same way that we have that thermometer for our homes, we have an internal thermometer for our bodies. And so a lot of us don't realize when it comes to weight that you've been, however 200 pounds for however long, your body, your mind, and your body are set at that set weight. And when you go far off, so we might lose that 10 pounds, we lose that same 10 pounds over and over. You get to 190 and your body's like, ooh, wait. We're getting too far off from where we're set. And what happens is that then your body kicks in to make you go back to what's normal. So again, it's not just about the nutrition plan. It's about understanding the way that the mind and body work so that you can really lose the weight and keep it off. And so that's a lot of times even why drastic changes are not effective, because sure, your body will lose the weight, but after a while, when you get too far off from that set point, your body is going to increase your hunger, right? And you're like, why am I so hungry? I'm binging now, I'm overeating now. And you're trying to figure out why. It's because you've gotten too far off of what's been comfortable for you for a really long time.
Right.
So you got to approach that thing with doing the physical things, going to the gym or, working out, all those things. But it's also mindfulness. It's also the mental piece. It's also gradually easing your subconscious into the changes that are taking place.
Yeah. No, and you know what? The easing.
Mm-hmm.
The easing. And, one of the things that I have to repeat to myself regularly, let it be easy. We've been just so indoctrinated that in order to get to anywhere that I want to go, the road has to be covered with glass and it has to be 400 degrees. And if it doesn't suck, is the journey worth it?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even, I mean, can we go there?
Yeah.
I just had a therapy session last week. Last Monday was my birthday, a week ago today.
Happy
And
birthday.
thank you. I had this therapy session and we were working through some of my fears. And it was a non-traditional, or not non-traditional. It was a different approach to therapy called rapid resolution therapy, or RRT. And this is it's a unique way that they approach therapy, where they really focus in, and it's easy. It's it's a little bit different from what I've been used to with talk therapy, but it was easy. And so we were talking and we're getting to the root of my fears, and she's talking to me and explaining things. And again, like talking to my subconscious, we're using images and symbols because that's what the subconscious responds to.
Right.
And she asked me, after we had been on our call for maybe an hour, it was about a 2-hour call. She asked me something along the lines of what is the fear, or like, what is the thing that's stopping you? And what came up for me was, it needs to be hard for whatever I'm, like from abundance, for money, for my business. Like, there was something in me, my subconscious was like, no, this needs to be hard, because that's what I learned. That's what life teaches us. That's what I've been conditioned to believe. And so if it ain't hard, I don't want it. And like, consciously, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense, because I want it to be easy. But that is the belief that I was holding on to. And that is what a lot of us hold on to. And so again, it was like, I had to, like, my mind spit out, like, I need to make this a struggle, or it's not worth it. And she was just like, do you even believe that? And I'm like, no, but I was holding on to that.
Right. And it's funny because it's like, as people, through any type of different question, different thinking, approaching something different, it's amazing the things that pop out that you didn't even realize that you're holding on to, and I'm guilty of that too. Like, I was such a hustler for so long. It was like, if you aren't hustling for your money, like, why do it? And when all these people were talking, it could be easy, I'm like, the hell, you don't know. And it is a reprogramming of everything that we've talked about. And, as we talked about COVID, it really opened up a lot of people's eyes that life could be different.
Yeah.
Or the fact that, I know for me, the fact that I was like slower than I've been in my entire life, or my conscious life, I was like, this is amazing. Like, to have this much space that I didn't have, like 30 minutes to be like, I hope I get every green light so I can catch that class on time. And it just was like, you know what? I liked having that much space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I liked being slow. And it was an eye opener, because had COVID not happened, I don't know if I would have given myself the time to explore what slow felt like. I would have thought slow was like, oh, I'm just going to get behind.
Yeah. I think COVID, I love that you share that. And I think what is true is that COVID gave a lot of us permission to try something different. And then we tried it and we were like, oh, I like it here.
Yeah.
I like it here. This feels good. Yeah.
Or why did I resist it for so long? Maybe there was, like, if there was a space or a gap in my schedule, immediately I was like, I got to fill it. And I would just be like hustling to be like, okay, who or how can I fill this hole with something?
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is so beautiful. And for everyone listening who can resonate with that, what is required is starting to ask the questions of, why do I believe that? Where did that belief come from? Which was what we were doing on that call. And what came up for me was, this is generational trauma. Like, my mom struggled and I was taught that, and my grandmother struggled and I was taught that. And so really starting to, like, peel back the layers of the onions and allow yourself to journey, to go through that work of, well, where did I learn this? Even with my behaviors and patterns and the way that I respond to stress, who taught me that? Is it working for me? Do I still have to hold on to this? I think giving yourself permission to put down what's no longer yours to carry will go a long way in mind, body, like all of those changes happening. But we don't even realize a lot of the times the beliefs, the values, the patterns that we're holding on to that don't even serve us, but we've been holding and carrying them for so long that it's just business as usual.
Yeah. And you're right. It is. We are either taught by our parents, taught by society that this is what we are. I just did a podcast about perfection, and most people won't identify themselves as perfectionists. But if we go unpack what perfectionism is and we talk about the behaviors, most people are like, oh, wow, I am. And a lot of it are things we get rewarded for. Oh, you're so organized. And so you're like, I got to be even more organized so that I can get more praise.
Yeah. I agree. Yes.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted you on the show. Cause I want, as people are listening to this, it's awareness, right? You know, both, Domineice and I both had these behaviors that we just did. Like, this is who I am, like, and we didn't see, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, now that it's been aware, you're now aware of it. You're like, do I want to continue?
Yes. And that's where meditation comes in, the mindfulness comes in, because people think that meditation is about controlling your thoughts or manipulating your thoughts, stopping your thoughts. And so you might have tried it and you might have been like, this doesn't work for me because I'm still thinking. Right. And that's a myth. Like, I want to just debunk that for anyone that is listening that has had that experience. I'm a certified meditation facilitator, and that is not what meditation is about. Meditation is just about becoming aware of the thoughts. So let all of the thoughts come in, let the long to-do list come in, and just envision yourself as an observer, as if you're watching a movie on a movie screen and you're seeing the thoughts go by and you're just noticing them without judgment, without criticism, without, naming something or shaming something. You're just noticing it. What happens is that when you train your mind to be an observer and you notice that there's the mind and there's something else outside of that that's able to notice the mind, you take that with you in your day-to-day life. So when you get the urge to overeat because you're stressed, or to respond, overreact to something because you're stressed, when you meditate consistently and you build up that mindfulness muscle, that's what you're doing, the same way that we go to the gym and build our physical muscles. Over time, you begin to pause. That moment of pause is what invites you to say, I'm going to make a different choice here. I don't have to respond the way that I always respond. I can choose to take a deep breath before I respond in a way that I'm not going to feel good about later. I can choose to go participate in a different behavior before I overeat this whole bag of chips and then feel guilty about it later. So meditation gives you the power to make different choices. It builds that self-awareness with yourself. And it's not going to be perfect every time, because sometimes those habitual behaviors are going to happen. But it'll give you more authority over your life, more freedom to make different choices. And so, again, that's why bringing the mind into the picture is so important, because when you become self-aware, you begin to notice the things that you're doing that maybe you didn't notice before. And then maybe consciously you don't feel good about the way that you're responding to things. And that is when you can say, okay, I'm going to start just, again, taking a deep breath or choosing a different stress response to something, and not just being in this automatic pattern, where you feel like you're losing this constant battle.
Right. And so, one of the things that you also do, because I know for me, meditation, I struggled with for a long time.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I was able to feel like I was able to get some success with was the breath work. And I don't know if it's because in my mind, I had to be doing something, that I couldn't let go of, like my mind my mind's always, even when we're having this conversation, my mind's still like whirling 5 million miles a minute. But I was able to access breath work. I felt helped me just to kind of find that like quietness more so than meditation. And so do you find for some people that it's either or do you find that, it's kind of, whatever your preference is?
That's a beautiful question. And nothing is a one size fits all approach. And so I think that people have to give themselves permission to play around with things and see what works for them as they're building I call it a soul care toy box, not a toolkit, but a soul care toy box. Because when you think about toys, you think like a toy box. It's adventurous and it's exploring and it's fun, and you figure out what works for you. And if it doesn't work, get rid of it. So it's not necessarily what do I need to do to fix myself, right? Because when we think about tools, like tools fix things, it's about how can I make this fun and how can I make this work for me? And a part of that is figuring out what works for you. And so it's getting curious. And if you notice that meditation doesn't feel like a good fit, maybe it's for right now because you're just starting. And like you said, your brain is so used to going 1,000 miles per minute. I love breath work because you get the benefits of meditation, but then you're also allowing yourself to release from the body. So it's
Mhm.
almost like a 2-for-1, if that makes sense, where
Yeah.
when you breathe, what happens is a lot of us are so used to being in our heads. So all of our energy is in the mind. We're working from the top down.
Yep.
Breath work is a bottom up approach where the energy, right? The breath flows throughout the body on a cellular level, and you give your mind permission to release all that it's holding, and it begins to flow through your body and be released. When the mind is quiet, you're going to get the benefits of mindfulness the same way that you would with meditation. You might get those downloads and answers that you've been seeking. And again, you're also allowing yourself to calm your nervous system, to reset the nervous system. So you're releasing the stress that you've been holding as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, and I like that. And you're right. It's like, I think because we get into these absolutes, like someone tells you, Dominique, you should meditate, and then you sit there, you're like, well, I suck at it, so that's not going to work. And then you're off to like the next thing to solve your problem versus, is there another way that I can create this downtime?
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone who's listening that isn't familiar with breath work, and because I don't want to assume that everyone has heard of it, breath work is the act of conscious breathing. So right now, as Kim and I are having this conversation, we're both breathing. Thankfully, it's not something that we have to think about, because imagine how hard life would be if we had to think about every breath. But with breath work or deep breathing, it's the act of really consciously controlling the breath. And so the automatic breathing practice just happens. Breath work is taking deep breaths in, really pulling from the belly, slowing down the exhale, or maybe it's speeding up the breath because you're feeling tired and you want some energy. Instead of going for that midday cup of coffee, you can do some conscious breaths, some faster breaths to really warm up the body and bring some warm energy into the body. And so breath work is beautiful. It's a beautiful healing modality that we all have access to anytime in our day. It doesn't take a long time. You don't have to have a ton of time to breathe, but it heals your body on a cellular level. So it's like the breath moves throughout the body, and it is able to heal the body on a really, really deep level. It's beneficial for what we're talking about, releasing stress and releasing trauma that you've been holding on to. It's helpful for mental clarity and providing energy. There's so many benefits. It's beautiful for tapping into your intuition if you're someone who's constantly searching for answers and maybe seeking external validation to help you figure out things. That's one of the reasons why I love it, because it helps me to quiet the mind and go right to the heart. So there's a ton of benefits from breath work, but essentially it's the act of conscious breathing.
And I like that. And one of the things we were talking before we actually pressed the record button was the way that I can access breath work even when I'm busy. We were talking before that, we both have clients who are just like, go, 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 go. And that, girl, I don't have time. And then you're like, well, even sitting at your desk, you can access either meditation or breath work that can give you that 5 minutes without
Absolutely.
Feeling like you have to, have this dedicated time to it.
Yeah. So the way that I trained and was guided when I went through my certification program was I learned 2 types of breath patterns, or not patterns, but breath work practices. There's integrative, which means you can integrate it throughout your day. So those are shorter 10-minute, or it's not 10 minutes, 8-minute or less sessions. It can be a minute, it can be 2 minutes, up to 8 minutes. And then there's meditative, which is longer, deeper sessions, it's called a meditative session because, again, it's going to be going deeper. It's going to be tapping into the intuition. A lot of times for those, we recommend lying down because you're going to be, shifting the pH in your body and having physical changes that occur as a result. With the integrative sessions, you're not going to have as much of that physical change, but you'll still have the benefits from taking those deep breaths. And so I like to tell people, you can be typing on your computer, you can get an email that's stressful, that something is now moved up that you thought was due 2 days from now, and you immediately feel that like stiffness in your body, the heart, you feel it in your heart, you feel it in your stomach. That's when you take a couple of breaths, even if it's like 5 breaths, that's when you take those big breaths in from the belly, pulling from the belly, holding, and then releasing all the way down from the chest. You can also be loading the dishwasher and taking intentional conscious breaths. You can be driving in your car and sitting at a red light. Now, I don't suggest practicing breath work on the go, like driving, but you can be sitting at a red light and have your eyes open and just taking a couple of deep breaths. I do that often when I have my crazy kids in the back and
Yep.
they're fighting, you know, they're two girls, they're always fighting. And I'm like, okay, let me breathe before I yell, and then I don't feel good about that later. And so you can be walking, going for a walk and taking a couple of deep breaths. And so there's always time to access the breath and access the benefits of breath work.
And it's funny because this was several years ago. This woman used to give me massages, and before we would start, she would be like, "All right, Kim, take a deep breath." And like I would take this breath, and she literally laughed in my face. She's like, "You think that's deep?"
Mm.
And it was just like, that was before I even had heard of breath work. And like for literally 5 minutes before we would do any type of massage, she's like, okay. She goes, "Let's go south of your heart." Because right now you're just breathing to your heart. And the more we would have these conversations about it, the more I would look at people. I teach group fitness, and I would look at people, and even before we even really got into the heart of class, there would be a lot of like these like very shallow
breathing.
And so when you got to the end, and now as I'm starting to string life together, now I understood why when you went to yoga, they're like, all the way down to your belly button, because no one consciously, unless you're taught, breathes to your belly button. If someone says, "Domineice, belly button, breathe all the way down to your belly button," because we're just like, breathing is just how I get by. Like I just need to breathe, but I don't think of it as a essential to my life.
Oh, I love what you just said. It literally gave me chills. Thank you for that, naming that, because what I teach and what I had to reprogram my body for is deep diaphragmatic breathing. So our diaphragm like sits right around the rib area. And like you said, a lot of us, we just breathe from our chest. So when we breathe, the breath is supposed to be able to explore the full body, like the upper half of the body. A lot of us, because we've been under stress for so long, we don't even realize that we're just breathing from the chest. That's an indicator of a body that's in a stress response constantly. So when you give your breath permission to explore the diaphragm, to explore the belly, that helps to shift and reset the nervous system. And so for anyone who's like, what does it even mean to breathe from my belly? If you take a big breath in and you imagine that you're breathing and you're expanding your belly like a balloon, you're engaging the belly. Most of us, when we breathe, we don't do that deep of a breath, but that is such an important part of breath work. And what happens is, again, the breath now has an opportunity to explore the belly, to explore the diaphragm, to explore the ribs, to explore the chest. And then you hold that for a second and you release. And it's a completely different experience. And over time, a consistent breathwork practice helps to reset our breathing patterns, because like you said, you notice it with your clients. A lot of us are walking around and we're breathing from our chest and we're breathing fast, and something happens and we feel like that choked up sensation in our heart. And that's because we're not breathing fully. So taking deep breaths begins to allow us to shift off that stress response that our bodies are constantly in and turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, or I like to say rest and restore, because it gives our bodies time to repair. And so that's another important benefit of breathing, is that you literally begin to shift the body back to, it's like a factory reset almost, where you shift the body back to how we were designed to be, but not how many of us are existing today.
Yeah. And, I love what you said, rest and digest, because many of the women that I work with, I always talk to them about, I was like, I'm like, do you poop? Right. And, many of them feel constipated. And I was like, I go, stress. And, for many people, they don't, when someone tells me stress is just how my life is. And I'm just like,
let's let that one go.
Right. I was like, okay, I'm like, that tells me we got a lot of work here. I'm like, okay, so let's start from the beginning. Like, what causes you stress? And so one of the things, like, then when someone tells me, I'm like, well, do you poop? And they're like, well, a couple times a week. And I'm just like, all right. And then we start talking about digestion and how it's like your stress is held in your body in places. And I don't think people get the interactions that stress has at various points in your body that, it can manifest it in so many different ways, depending on how you hold it. It's like,
oh, yes.
I like, for me, it's my shoulders. As soon as I feel like my shoulders are up here, I'm like, okay, I don't know. And maybe I don't feel stressed, but I'm like, okay, something is happening. And I have to kind of like sit and be like, what is it, to kind of identify so I can start to unpeel the layers.
Yes. So the constipation piece, there's two things I want to say about that. I was taking notes as you were talking. So when we are stressed, when our bodies are in a fight or flight response, which is what happens when we're in a stress response, there certain bodily functions are necessary. So let me back up. So when we experience stress is designed, our mind, the number one goal of our mind is to keep us safe, to keep us alive. So when we experience stress, our mind is thinking, I'm in a dangerous situation where my life is threatened right now, and I need to do something to keep myself alive. Now, this was wonderful thousands of years ago when we roamed the planet with saber-tooth tigers and our lives were literally in danger. But the issue is that so many of us are dealing with modern day stressors. So at any given moment, in any given period, 24-hour period, we can be stressed we can experience stressors from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. Your body doesn't know that your boss just sent you an email, or, your colleague was being a jerk at work. Your body thinks that you're in a state of dying or surviving. And it's having that same sort of response in your body as if you were being chased by a tiger. Now, consciously that you're just sitting at your desk and this thing is happening. But again, your body is responding as if it needs to save your life. So all of the same chemicals and hormones, the adrenaline, the cortisol, all of these things are being constantly released into your bloodstream from your nervous system. What happens is there are physical changes that happen. So your heart is going to beat faster. The blood is going to rush to your muscles because your body thinks, oh shit, I got to run, right? Like I got to get out of here.
Right.
Your blood pressure is going to increase to make sure that this happened. Like all of these biological things happen when we experience stress. The other side of that a lot of people don't know is that when all of those things happen, your body also shuts down certain functions. So it will shut down your digestive system. It will shut down your reproductive system, because you don't need to be digesting food when you're trying to run away from a tiger. So when women are dealing with constipation, that's a sure sign, or anyone, not just women, but when we are as human beings dealing with something like constipation, that is a sign that your body is in a stress response, because it's constantly shutting down digestion, because it thinks that you're trying to run from a tiger or run from, whatever thing is threatening your life.
Right.
So again, that lets you know our bodies are always communicating with us. Like that is your body saying something's not right here. And you got to do things to let your body know that it's safe so that it can turn on the digestion and the reproduction, like even having issues with, getting pregnant and all of those things. Like there's always a reason for things. Like reproduction literally gets shut down when you're stressed. And so your body isn't prioritizing birthing a baby, it's trying to keep you alive, or, creating a baby, it's trying to keep you alive. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. I'm going to pause there and see if you had any thoughts on that before I address that constipation from an energetic place.
You're spot on, because most people, we've been so marketed to that constipation is a Metamucil problem.
Yeah.
Just take some Metamucil every morning and you'll poop like a champ.
Yep. And that ain't it.
Right. Like you can't.
It's deeper.
Where you can't. I always say you can't out supplement your life. Like your lifestyle is always going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second thing I wanted to note is that I have spent time studying and creating a course that's all about balancing the chakras, because in addition to our physical bodies, we also have our energetic bodies. And so a lot of us, we aren't grounded. And that's why we have all of these things happening, the stress, the constipation, all of the bodily functions. Constipation is a malfunction of a root chakra imbalance. So the root chakra is the first chakra in the system of 7 chakras, and the chakras are just energy wheels that hold energy. And when they're functioning properly, they communicate with one another and energy is flowing. But when they aren't properly functioning, they might be blocked, or they might be imbalanced, or, there's something stopping the energy from moving. Things manifest physically. So everything starts energetically before it starts physically. The root chakra is the home of our past experiences, our memories, our cultural, like where we built our first tribe, our community, all of our values and beliefs are stored there. So if you have gone through any sort of, childhood trauma or any trauma from your life, or there's things that you're holding, constipation can be a sign that you're holding energy in the root chakra that needs to be released. Even like lower back pain, people just think, I'm going to put a heating pad on this. The root chakra is located at the base of the spine, and any sort of lower body, extremities that are happening, things that are off, can be an indication of a root chakra imbalance. And so you might, again, when I was talking about, I spent that 90 days releasing, I was releasing things that I had been holding energetically as well.
Yeah, no, and you're right. There was a woman who came on my show probably 2 or 3 years ago, and she was like, if you can't hear your body whisper, how can you hear it scream?
Oof, so good.
Yeah. And I just think back, and if you kind of like, it's once you get to the other side, it's really easy to start to get reflective and start to see all of these little like smoke signals that your body was giving you for me, decades. And I finally, now I look back and I was like, you know what? I've been a hot mess for a long time. It wasn't, like many of us think that like all of a sudden you put on 50 pounds, or all of a sudden, this back pain just came out of nowhere. And if you look back and you chip away at all the things that you did over the course of time, you're like, oh yeah, that too. And I don't think many of us, as you just unpack, was that all of our experiences lead, and if we haven't dealt with our shit, it's just gonna just keep going into that box, going into that box, going into that box, and eventually that box is going to overflow.
Yeah. The body holds the truth is what I like to say. And so our bodies are literally walking libraries of all of our experiences. And what I tell people when it comes to stress is that you might be dealing with stress today. You might be dealing with stress from last week. You might be still holding stress in your body from last month. You might be holding stress in your body from 2 years ago when the pandemic hit. Unless you're intention 10 years ago, decades ago, unless you signal to your body that it is safe to release, your body's literally holding on to all of that. And that was the case for me. I was holding on to, as a as a grown adult woman, childhood trauma that I needed to let go. And I thought, consciously, that I had worked through it, because I've been to therapy and I've done all the things, but the mind and the body they're connected. And, we know that, but they're the way that you approach them and the way that you heal them is completely different. And so many of us, and I was just having a conversation with a woman yesterday. This is a great example. I was talking to an old college friend, and we just reconnected via Zoom. I sometimes do spirit checks with my friends when I just want to check in on them. And we were talking, and she had just recently had a new baby, but she experienced child loss a couple of years ago. And she was saying how over the last almost 4 years now since she experienced that first loss, she's been dealing with an ongoing depression, and she's been really sad, and she has moments where she comes out of it, but then she goes back. And I was asking her, well, what are you doing to work through? And she's like, I've been in therapy since 2019 and I'm still fighting this energy. And I said, well, what do you do for your body? And she's like, nothing. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're processing it consciously, but your body's still holding on to the loss of that child. Whatever other experiences in your life that you've incurred, you are not giving your body any sort of way to release. And we sometimes shun emotions, and we put them in categories of this is negative and this is positive. And, I don't want to feel sad, or I don't want to feel angry, but emotions are just messengers. They're just communicators of things going on in your body. And so if you feel sadness, or if you feel anger, or whatever emotions that I'm doing air quotes, we negatively feel, that's your body saying, hey, there's something here that you need to address. And so when we go to therapy, we're talking through and processing it and trying to make sense of it, but the body is still holding it. The body is still holding on to it. And so that's where the somatic approaches, the body-centered approaches become so important, in conjunction with something like therapy, to help us process through and fully heal. But we're missing so much of the healing process if we're only going to therapy, or if we're only focusing on the nutrition plan. And so that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, because a lot of people don't realize that our bodies literally keep the score.
It does. And I love that. I love that saying, because the body does keep score, even though we might have moved on. We've been like, oh, that was 10 years ago. And you moved on. Your body still is holding on to it, because it's like, well, I just want to make sure I remember how to deal with this, so that if we happens upon again, I'm ready. And I think like mentally, like I know my husband and I were just talking about this yesterday, that like we're not dwellers, like we're people who we're like, yeah, that happened, it was bad, it was shitty, and you're just like, you moved on, but then are you still somewhere in like the back closet? Is there something still there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
Absolutely.
there are other people who that trauma's happened to them every single day, or every few moments they relive where they were.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you go back and forth, like they're both responses. Like there's no good, there's no bad. It's just how, you deal with your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always encourage people that healing is a multi-pronged process of let's approach it from the mind and let's talk through it and understand it, because sometimes talking through and understanding it is important. Let's have those conversations, those courageous conversations, but let's also breathe. Let's also do yoga, or what, you can go for a walk. It doesn't have to be again, it doesn't have to be hard. When we were in COVID and I lost the weight that I lost, I wasn't going to the gym. The gyms weren't open. I was doing 15-minute home workouts or taking my kids out to get fresh air and going for a 30-minute walk. It was easy. It doesn't have to be a complicated process of working out and, going hard at the gym 5 days a week and burning yourself out from that physical, because even that can be a stressor for your body.
Right.
You can let it be easy, but you do have to release the energy. And so going back to what we said at the top of the conversation with the importance of building self-awareness, you have to start to notice how your body is communicating to you. Like you mentioned, feeling that tightness and tension in the shoulders. So many people are stressed every day and they don't even realize the indicators of stress. So just starting to, again, be mindful, notice, sense, and feel how your body is responding to you. Building that awareness with your body goes a long way, because for me, I've been doing this work for a couple of years now. I can feel when my body is holding stress. It's not that I don't get stressed, because I teach people, I educate people on how to manage stress. I'm still human. My body still responds to things, but I'm much more aware of it now. So it doesn't build the way that it used to build.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think people always think that like you're cured.
Oh yeah.
And you're never cured. It's like going on a road trip, and it's like you've just made a pit stop. Like, and so now as you move forward past that pit stop, you remember, you're like, oh yeah, I remember back in Ohio. And now you're like, oh yeah, and we got through that. Okay, so I'm going to get through it the same way I got to Ohio. And I think for many of us, we just think that it's, once something happens, it's in your rear view mirror. And it's always, there's always going to be something that pops up, and it could be the same thing over and over again until you finally slay that dragon.
Yeah. And that takes time. I think I always share with people in the healing process that our mind or our ego has a certain amount of time that it thinks things it should take for healing to occur. So we might think, oh, I've been working through this for 6 months. I should be healed of this from by now. But the body and the healing process and the body is completely different. So it might take you a couple of days or months to feel relief. But if you've been really holding on to something for a while, it can also take longer. And so having that grace and compassion with yourself is so important to the healing and releasing process. And also understanding, I also share that if you've been dealing with ongoing stress and trauma for years, your nervous system is not resetting overnight. It's going to take some time for you to feel different. So you might do one breathwork session and you're like, well, that didn't work because I still feel the same. Well, yeah, you've been holding stress in your body for 15 years. Like, give your body some grace and let it do what it needs to do. But our bodies are such beautiful vessels that they have the ability to heal themselves a lot of the times. We have so much power than we recognize and realize, but it does sometimes take time. And so if it's been years of piling on and, behaviors that haven't been serving you, you got to give your body some time to reset, to kind of go back. Like I said, that factory reset, that's a process and it can take some time.
Yeah, no. And I think you're right. Like we just want that, like, that aspirin effect. I took an aspirin and 2 hours later, my headache better be gone. Yeah. And you're just like, no, like you're unpacking, for some people, decades of stories, bullshit, life, that it's like, it's a never ending story.
Yeah. I love that. And I think like all of this is kind of coming full circle as we near the end of this conversation,
right?
Thinking about what beliefs and values that you're holding that need to be released. if you are someone who's always looking for the quick fix, you got to let that go and understand that
Yeah.
this can take some time. It might take time for you to see those results physically, and it might take time for you to feel those results internally with your nervous system and to feel that stress start to dissipate. It might take some time for you to reset those values and beliefs that you've been holding. It's not a race. We're so, again, because we live in this instant gratification society, we're always looking for the quick fix. But I can tell you from my own experience, and I think we share that in common, we've tried the quick fixes, and they might work temporarily, but they don't work in the long term. And so it's like, what can I do to begin to focus on being a healthy, whole, healed version of myself, and honoring that might take some time.
Yeah, agreed. And that's a perfect spot for us to wrap up our call. Like, I loved everything you shared here. And, I love when I meet guests that we don't have a connection prior to the call, that we both come to the same place. It is a journey. Like, it's not going to be, take 2 of these and call me in the morning. We are always going to be working, they say new level, new devil. So it's like, once you kind of work through something else might either pop its way up immediately or months down the line, and you're like, damn, I thought I was done. And it's like, I'm here, so
Yeah.
I love that the things that you share, that it's like really just coming back to me and giving myself a 30-day challenge, and not a hard challenge. The hard challenge, can you sit for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Quietly meditating, breath, or just sitting.
Yeah.
Dropping yourself to that damn chair.
I love that. I love that as a takeaway for your listeners, because again, doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be long for it to be impactful and helpful for you. But you do need to start going within and connecting with yourself and just tuning into what is going on in your body, building that self-awareness.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for taking the time today. So before we wrap up, 2 things. One, what is one thing that makes you feel magical?
Oof, I love this question. In this moment, what's coming up for me is owning the power that I've been so afraid to own for such a long time.
Ooh.
I have ran away from being seen because of my own trauma, being heard because of my own trauma, that it was like, God, I don't want to do that. Like, don't give me that. Give me something else. Give me something easy. And I have sat on goals that have been on my heart for a really long time because I've been afraid to be seen and heard by the world, and literally just afraid of my own power. And so what makes me feel magical in this moment is that I am finally at a space in my life where I'm open to the magic, the power that I'm holding. And so I'm literally writing a book right now. I've pretty much finished. I'm like working through the self-publishing and printing process, but I'm writing a book. I'm launching a membership for women who are focused on really wanting to nourish themselves more in this somatic and whole way. I'm doing all of these things that are big and scary, and it feels amazing and magical.
I absolutely love that. And you're right. It is the scary part, letting yourself just like be bigger than you think you could be, and be okay with it. Be like, you know what? I could blow up like a volcano, but a volcano's not like, oh, I might hurt a village. Like, a volcano is like, hey, it's time.
One of my favorite poems is Our Deepest Fear. And it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond belief.
Yes.
And it's like, that's scary. That can be scary, if you're not ready to own all of that.
Yeah. And like every time I'm about to do something big, I'm always like reflect on that poem, or Eminem, Lose It. Both songs. Both things are like, we're like standing on the edge of something really big, and you can either run back or you can just hold your nose and jump in. So,
and trust that the universe is going to catch you. So I've jumped, and I'm in the trusting space right now, and that feels pretty damn magical.
I think the parachute's going to come up for you, sister. And then where can people find you? Because I just love, like, I love simple. Like, you are simple, and I love it because God knows complicated sucks.
Yeah, I tried complicated for so long, and it does suck. It does. There's no other way to put it. I am most active on Instagram and LinkedIn at Domineice Clifton. So if anyone wants to connect with me, those are the two social spaces. And I also have, for anyone who's listening that might be intrigued by breathwork and wants to try it, I am offering a free 10-minute guided breathwork session by me. It's it's tinyurl.com/breathe with Dom. And of course, I'll share that with you so you can link it in the show notes. But again, that's a free download and it's 10 minutes. It doesn't take a long time. You can do
Perfect.
it, early in the morning. I know I listened to a couple of episodes and you talk about the morning routine or even before bed. So that would be a beautiful place to start and just try it maybe a few times and see how that lands in your body.
Perfect. Oh, this was so great. Like I know I learned stuff. I always take notes during my podcast. And thank you so much for the time. And ladies, definitely take her up on that breath work, because I did another breath work podcast I'll link up, but it was like, it's a game changer. It was a game changer for me. Like it really helps me to just like take the deeper breath that I so needed to take.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kim, for having me. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I've enjoyed it so much.
You are quite welcome. All right, Magic Makers, make sure you listen to her and make sure you take a nice deep breath, and do me a favor, follow her. She gives some great, nice, easy, practical advice, because we all need to stop being stress balls. Stress is not just how life is.